verb by the name of get, and that's why you can read the data. All right, so we're clear with get method. That's how we can read data. However, how we can add data onto the server. So how we can insert data. And in order to do that, we need to use a post method. But it's not like I can somehow configure a browser and start making post requests. Fortunately, that's not how it works. That's why I provided a little bit of help. Now, keep in mind one thing where after we set up a post method, effectively, once we take a look at two flavors of how we can set up post request, we will install one more tool, which is going to be crucial in our Express server development, which is just going to allow us to test everything much faster. But since for the post, I do want to show you two flavors that we can have, we'll use a little bit of static data, meaning there's an app that I prepared. But don't worry, it's not like you'll have to do that each and every time to test any of these methods. And you'll see what I'm talking about in the following videos. So first, let's start by jogging our memory a bit. We have app.use. Now what app.use is doing is just applies the middleware to all our routes, correct? And I also mentioned that we have this option of setting up a public folder. Now, we can call whatever we would want, but for this methods example, I prepared a methods.public. As you can see, it is just a folder with index.html, with JavaScript HTML, some CSS, and once we navigate there, of course, I'll show you how the functionality works. So this is just prepared so we can test those other methods, meaning more specifically the post method, because we cannot simply just perform a post request from the browser. So first, let's set up that methods public as our public folder. That's step number one. So let's set it up as our static assets. And in order to do that, I'm just going to add first a comment and I'll say assets. And then I'm going to go with app.use. Again, remember that is our method. And this is going to be a built-in middleware. And the name is Express Static. So I just grab my Express instance. I look for the method of static. And if you remember, we just need to provide here a path. And instead of going public or static, like I showed you previously, I'm just going to go with / and then methods and then public, because this is where I set up my static files for these examples. We invoke it. And now if we go to the homepage, we shouldn't get this error. So once you invoke, there it is. We have a somewhat decent looking HTML file with two options. We have this JavaScript option, which we're going to cover second. And first one is going to be a traditional form example. And again, the reason why we do that is because you cannot simply just configure your browser to perform a post request. You either need to use a tool, which we're going to install by the name of Postman, or Insomnia is another popular one, or you need to set up basically a working application. And if you take a look in the methods public, we have this working application. All right. And once we have the basic setup in place, now let's take a look at our two flavors when it comes to the post method. And I want you to navigate to index.html. And in there, you'll find pretty typical index.html file with some styling, with nav, as well as the form. And in the form, we have two attributes. We have action one, as well as the method. And as you can clearly see, the value for the method is post. And this action one just says where we're going to send it. And notice how we have / login. So that means that this URL, this path, is on our server. But of course, we know that in the app.js, we're not handling that. So for the form, there's going to be one path. And then for the second example, when we use straight up JavaScript, then of course, there's going to be a different path for that. So this is going to be the URL or path where we're submitting the form. And inside of the form, we have a label, we have input. So basically, we have name attribute for this one, we have the ID, as well as the autocomplete. So we'll type in some kind of value, and then we'll send this to /login. So localhost, and then /login. And of course, we also have a submit button. So now let's start by taking a look what happens when we simply submit this form. So go here, type some kind of gibberish. In my case, I'm going to go with John. Bravely press enter. And of course, we do have cannot post login. Okay, that's fine. We're not expecting anything anyway, right? We know that there is no route that handles the post for the login. But what's really interesting here is in the network tab, of course, I can see my request. In this case, this is login. Now this is 404. And again, I'm going to repeat this 20,000 times, but check out the method. So method is not get, method is post. And then we're going to localhost 5,000 and then /login. Now, what's also really interesting, all the way in the bottom, what do you see here? You see this form data, and then we have key value pair. We have name and John. And if you remember, when we talked about HTTP messages, I said that the body is optional. So for example, when we're sending a GET request, we're not sending a body. But when we're sending a POST request, it's very crucial. So if I want to add something onto the server, of course, I want to get that data. I mean, otherwise, how am I going to know what to add to the server? Doesn't that make sense? I hope it does. So let's go back. Okay, I see this name and I see John. And if you're not familiar, basically the way it works is whatever you provide here for the name is going to be a key. So for example, if I'm going to set this up as testing, you'll see that now when we perform the same request, the same post request, again, with the same value, different value, it doesn't really matter. Now, of course, that key name is going to be testing. So whatever value you provide over here, that is going to be the key. And of course, the value is whatever you're submitting. So in my case, it's either Peter or John. Okay, that's out of the way. So I'm going to change it back to name. And now we need to understand something where the request is coming in, but A, we're not handling that. And B, we don't have the middleware that actually adds this data that the form, in this case, is sending to our request. So let's see how we can fix the first one. And we simply need to come up with a route. Now, in this case, remember, we're dealing with post. This is not get. And we're going to go with / and then login here. Because, of course, that's what I have in my form. Again, we go with rec and res. And technically, we can come up with some kind of info. I can say send, and I'm simply going to say post. And that's it. Just so we can save time on typing. Again, let's navigate back. And in this case, let's try Susan. Let's send it. Yeah, I see the post. So I don't have the 400 anymore, or 404. So that's cool. But unfortunately, I have no access at this point to whatever I'm being sent. So unfortunately, I cannot access that Susan or John or whatever value. So unfortunately, I cannot add, for example, to my list if I wanted to. Now, how do we add it? Well, this is where the middleware comes in. So previously we covered static assets with Express Static. In order to get the form data, we need to go with URL and coded middleware. So I'll add here parse form data. And essentially, this is just going to parse that data and add the values to rec.body. So where we have a post request in the rec.body property, we'll find all the info. And in order to use this middleware, surprise, surprise, we're going to use app.use. And then we'll pass in express and then URL encoded. And then you also pass in a flag where you go with extended and you set up false. And if you're wondering why are we adding this extended false flag, or you just want to get more info about this URL in coded middleware, simply let's head back to the documentation. In this case, we're looking for the express. And notice here, I have express URL encoded. This is a built-in middleware function in Express. It parses incoming requests with URL encoded payloads, and it is based on the body parser. So in the previous versions of Express, you had to actually install the body parser. Now, in this case, you don't. It already comes built in. And as far as this extended, this option allows to choose between parsing URL encoded data with query string library when false, meaning this is our case, or the QS library when true. Again, I wouldn't lose my sleep over this one. Again, the common approach is using this extended and false. And once we can access it, then we can do some cool functionality. So first, let's just scroll down a bit where we have the login. And first, I'm just going to start by console logging rec and body. Let's save that one. And again, back to our browser. Again, I'm going to go with Susan. This was 200, so everything was successful. And now, of course, in the rec.body, I also have a name, and the value is Susan. So now we can start doing something with this data. Now, I purposely set up two examples. One is going to be for form, which of course is this one, and then one is for the JavaScript. Now, with the JavaScript example, this is where we'll actually manipulate this people array. For the time being, with login, this is a separate issue. We're just dealing with the form. So we'll just try to make things interesting by checking for the name. If the name is provided, then we'll send back welcome and then pass in that name. If the name is not provided, so for example, if the user is trying to submit the form empty, for example, like so, we'll just send back 401, please provide credentials. Again, please keep in mind this is just an example, and I'm fully aware that we can check for empty values here on the front end. Again, the goal of this example is to show you how to handle this on the server. So I have a rec.body. Okay, I can see that in this case I have name, but it is empty. So now, of course, let's set up our logic. First, I'm going to go with const name, and that one is equal to rec.body. So I'm destructuring my name property, and I'll just check if the name exists, whatever the value. That could be B, that could be Bobby Lee, that could be, again, taco, burrito, whatever you want. And as you can see, I'm getting quite hungry. So let's go with return res.status. Then let's set up a 200, which just says that we were successful. And we're going to go with send, and we'll set up a template string, welcome, and I'm just going to access my name. So if there's some value, I'll send back 200, and I'll say welcome, whatever is the value. If not, well, here we're going to go with res, and let's just add status here. And again, just for kicks, I'm going to go with 401, and we're going to go with send. And of course, let's say, please provide and credentials, like so. Let's save this one, and now we should truly see how it works in the action. Now, I'll leave, I guess, the tab for now, and let's just try to submit. So, for example, if I submit with empty values, I'm going to see please provide credentials, and as far as my login, it is 401. That's what the server is sending back. However, if I type in some kind of value, for example, Anna comes to mind, I have welcome and Anna. So that's our first flavor when it comes to post requests, where we use the form. And again, this is just front end where we come up with an action. And since this index.html is on the same server, we simply go with / and login. Of course, if your front end application is separate from your server, then you're going to provide a full path where the server is hosted. So basically a full domain. And then we go with method post. Now, this is technically a front end part, but it is crucial that we understand it. So then we perform, of course, a post request. We hit our URL. So in this case, we hit our /login. And this is the part where we handle that on a server. In order to get that data, whatever we are being sent, we need to use a middleware. This one is built into Express. So again, we simply just need to use app.use, which is going to apply this middleware to all our incoming requests. And then we just pass in extended false flag. And the moment we do that, in the rec.body, we'll have access to our form values. So whatever is set up here as a value, that is going to be our key. And whatever is passed into our form, well, of course, that is going to be the actual value that we're getting. So if I go here with name, I'm going to see either Susan, Anna, or whatever user provides. Now, like I already previously mentioned, this is just for demonstration. This is just so we have a bit more interesting example instead of just sending back the name. So hopefully this part is clear. And now we can